from the European Union delegation to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, Dr. Ari Susilo, Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Science, Universitas Indonesia, professors, colleagues, students, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the public lecture organized by Fakultas of Social and Political Science Universitas Indonesia and the delegation of European Union to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam in Indonesia this afternoon. I'm very pleased to be the chair of this session. I'm Evi Fitriani from International Relations Department Universitas Indonesia. Before we start, let me give opportunity to our interpreter to explain about some facility that we have for this public lecture. Please, Ibu Grisela.
Selamat siang, Bapak Ibu sekalian. Nama saya Griselda Raisa. Saya adalah seorang juru bahasa bersertifikasi. Bersama dengan rekan saya Adi Aribowo, kami akan menjadi interpreter untuk acara pada hari ini. Ambassador, you may follow from the English channel. I will be using Indonesian. Petunjuk penggunaan fitur penerjemahan simultan. Silakan klik tombol interpretation, yakni tombol bergambar bola dunia di kanan bawah layar Bapak Ibu sekalian. Atau apabila menggunakan HP, silakan klik tombol titik 3 di bagian kanan bawah. Kemudian akan ada 3 pilihan. Jika tidak memerlukan fitur penerjemahan, silakan klik off. Jika memerlukan penerjemahan, silakan pilih channel berikut, English untuk mendengarkan terjemahan dalam bahasa Inggris, Indonesian untuk mendengarkan terjemahan dalam bahasa Indonesia. Dan 2 pesan penting adalah mohon jangan klik mute original audio agar Anda dapat terus mengikuti diskusi di floor saat terjadi pergantian bahasa. Dan jika Anda ingin menggunakan fitur penerjemahan dan ingin bicara, mohon pastikan untuk bicara di channel yang sama dengan bahasa yang Anda gunakan, atau klik off. Sebagai contoh, mohon bicara bahasa Indonesia di channel Indonesian, atau bicara bahasa Inggris di channel English, untuk menghindari percampuran suara dengan interpreter. Yang terakhir, apabila ada kendala, silakan hubungi kami, nomor kontak tertera. Terima kasih dan semoga acaranya berjalan dengan lancar. Terima kasih, Bu Evi, saya kembalikan ke MC.
Thank you, Ibu Griselda. Ladies and gentlemen, before we start, let me invite our Dean, the Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Science Universitas Indonesia, Dr. Ari Susilo, to give the opening remarks. Dr. Ari, please.
Thank you very much, Ibu Evi Fitriani. Ambassador Vincent Piket, Professor, colleagues, and students. I heard students from many universities in Indonesia already join in this public lecture. This is great, I think. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I heard also several senior diplomats from Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Republic of Indonesia, including the former Indonesian ambassador to European Union and Belgium, Excellency Yuri Octavian Tamrin, also joined in this public lecture. First of all, good afternoon, and I hope all you are safe and well. First of all, I would like to convey warm regards from the Rector of Universitas Indonesia, Professor Ari Kunchoro, to Ambassador Vincent Piket. Today is a great day in conjunction with the 53rd anniversary of the Faculty of Social and Political Sciences, Universitas Indonesia, and despite of COVID-19 pandemic, we could meet and conduct this public lecture by His Excellency Mr. Vincent Piket, Ambassador of the European Union to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, on the topic that's very relevant and important: the European Union strategy in coping with multidimensional impact and challenges of COVID-19 pandemic. This is a very relevant topic these days, as we have been experienced the pandemic of COVID-19 changing our lives and the world in more than 1 year. The intensity of the impact and the magnitude of the intensity of pandemic is beyond our imagination. One of my sociologist colleagues who chaired the Selo Sumarjan Memorial discussion on the social fatigue during the pandemic yesterday stated that this pandemic was an agent of history that world rarely encountered. Thus, naturally, states and societies around the world have strived to overcome its effect, and international society have learned from each other to cope with this pandemic. In this context of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences Universitas Indonesia public lecture today, Indonesian people and officials can learn and take important lessons from the experience of the European Union and European countries in coping with the impact and challenges of this pandemic to build not only stronger social relations, but also a more effective and stronger governance. I am very thankful to Ambassador Vincent Piket, who is willing to share his perspective in this matter. The European Union is one of ASEAN dialogue partner and a very important associate of Indonesia. But Universitas Indonesia really has contact with the European Union delegation. I hope this public lecture can be a good beginning for future productive cooperation between Universitas Indonesia and the European Union delegation in the country. Our academic community perceive their counterparts in European Union member countries highly credible in almost all disciplines, especially in the development of sustainable development, climate policies and climate action, renewable energy, circular economy, waste management, marine and maritime studies, etc. I hope the public lecture by the European Union Ambassador Mr. Vincent Piket this afternoon will generate future productive collaboration between our academic and students. Lastly, I would like to thank the organizing committee from Faculty of Social and Political Sciences and their counterpart from European Union delegation for making this public lecture possible. I also want to thank all participants from all over Indonesia who are attending this event. I look forward to the Ambassador Vincent's speech and to our inspiring discussion. Thank you very much, Ari Susilo, Dean of Faculty of Social and Political Sciences.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ali Susilo, for your warm welcoming remarks. And before we go further with our program, can I ask all of you to take a picture together? And I will ask our public relation officer to start the picture, please. And may also let you know that Ambassador Yuri Tamrin, a former Indonesian ambassador for EU, are among us. So if Pak Tamrin can, Pak Yuri can also join us in the photo session, will be great. Please, Christo.
Okay, thank you, Ma'am Andy. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, please be ready in front of your webcam. We will take only one picture. On my mark, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Please hold it up. Thank you.
Is that all?
Thank you,
how many, Christo? How many pictures do you want to take?
Only one, man.
Okay, okay.
Okay, that's all, man.
Okay, we are all done. Okay.
Rest of the picture will be continue following the event. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for all of you for a very nice post for the picture. And I would like now to introduce our ambassador, Vincent Piket, the head of the EU delegation in Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam. Ambassador Vincent Piket is based in Jakarta and accredited to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam since 2019. And prior to his appointment in Jakarta, Ambassador worked in Brussels at the EU Foreign Service, especially in the European External Action Service. This is a special agency established by the European Union after the Lisbon Treaty, and he was at the head of the division for relation with Maghreb countries. Ambassador Piket has a long familiarity with the Asian region, where earlier he served as the EU ambassador to Malaysia and also EU ambassador or head of EU office to Hong Kong and Macau. And he was also held position in Central and Eastern Europe, including Slovenia and also Russia, where he was the deputy head of the mission. Ambassador Piket holds a Master of Arts from Radboud University Nijmegen in the Netherlands, and also doctorate in arts from Radboud University Nijmegen, the Netherlands. He is alumnus of the Fulbright program and the fellow of American Council of the Learned Society. Oh, Ambassador, we are both Fulbright fellows there. Nice to meet you. But ladies and gentlemen, before I allow Ambassador to start the talk, may I also inform you that question for the ambassador can be addressed through the platform of Q&A in this Zoom. Yeah, please write your question and write it nicely. Why? Because we will have 10 souvenirs, 10 prizes for those who can write a good question, and then we'll put your question at the Q&A session afterwards. Yeah, and for journalists, welcome to this event. We also welcome your question, and please write the question in the Q&A platform of the Zoom. Without further ado, I would like to invite Ambassador Vincent Piket to deliver his speech on the EU strategy in coping with the multidimensional impact and challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic. Ambassador Vincent, please.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Evi Fitriani, Dr. Ari Susilo, the Dean of the Faculty of Social and Political Science. Thank you both for the invitation to me to speak to you this afternoon on the occasion of your 53rd Dies Natalis. A beautiful age already, and of course there are many successful years for you to come as faculty and also as Universitas Indonesia, one of the most respected institutions, academic institutions in your country. I'm very grateful for this opportunity and very honored indeed. And indeed, as you say, Honorable Dean, I'm keen to see this as part of a lasting cooperation. It goes back a little bit already, a couple of years. I know my predecessor spoke at the university, and I'm doing now the same, and certainly myself and my staff are keen to continue the cooperation. I'm keen also to learn that we have a very diverse audience in the room, diverse in terms of experience. There are professors. There is your former ambassador to the EU, Ambassador Yuri Tamrin, whom I met in Brussels in the summer of 2019 as part of my preparation for my posting in Indonesia. And it's a great pleasure to meet with him on that occasion. And I can say that he had a very successful term as Indonesia's ambassador to the EU and also to Belgium and Luxembourg, by the way. So I am hopeful to see him also here now back in Jakarta. The topic, I should say also diversity in terms of geography. Many of us are in Jakarta, but I'm told that we have also participants from from Sumatra, even from the very tip of Sumatra, Aceh. We have participants from Kalimantan, from Bali, and possibly, as Dr. Evi said, possibly also from colleagues of hers from now in Papua. So that's fantastic. This vast country, I continue to be overwhelmed by the size of Indonesia, reaching from east to west, the same distance as from Ireland all the way to Kazakhstan. Now that is a phenomenal distance, and it's not just the size geographically, but also the size population terms, and your morphology with these 17,000, nobody knows exactly how many, but 17,000 islands in your fantastically beautiful archipelago. So it's very good to have you all here. I've been in Indonesia now for a good year and a half. Fantastic period, not an easy one, of course, for obvious reasons, but it's been both professionally and privately a very fulfilling time already now, and I still have a lot of years ahead. The title of my presentation is a very long one, very long title, with complex words and so on. And of course, on the one hand, it reflects the fact that the COVID crisis is a very complex crisis, has so many different dimensions: domestic, international, medical, social, economic, human rights, you name it. So, and all these aspects come into play. But despite the very long and complex title, I hope that I can speak in simple terms and also have an engagement with you later on while we have the question and comment session. When speaking about COVID in wherever I would be, but certainly here in Indonesia, I always start by expressing my sympathy to the people your citizens who have lost loved ones, family members, friends, ever since the COVID crisis struck. Many citizens have lost their job, or have lost part of their job, or have lost salary at the minimum. So the population is facing an extremely hard time, and I wish to say that on behalf of the EU, but also personally, that we have solidarity towards Indonesia and its citizens in this difficult time. I'll come back to that point a little bit later. Now, let me first look for a moment at the EU itself. And the COVID crisis is still very much there. Yesterday and today, we have a European Council meeting happening in Brussels virtually. European Council brings together the heads of state and the heads of government of all 27 member states, presided by the President of the European Council, Mr. Charles Michel, with, of course, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, attending, and also my chief, the High Representative for the EU's common foreign and security policy, Josep Borrell. So the first topic on the agenda last night, was COVID and the COVID response by the EU, how to shape it. What do we see on the ground in terms of the pandemic trends? we see a European Union that is still in the second wave. However, with a somewhat more positive development over the last 10 days or so, with stable or declining trends in infections in 20 of our member states. At the same time, in 7 other member states, the number of infections has continued to go up, and the hospital capacity in those member states is under severe pressure. So a slightly more positive trend with, at the same time, a number of very prominent peaks in some of our member states. Another factor is for sure that citizens are getting tired. They, like here, have been facing social isolation, hardship, economic, social, medical, for a year. And that is extremely testing for society. There's no doubt about it. And at the same time, we cannot give up. We have to carry on, citizens individually and societies as a whole, and the EU as well. And because without continuing determination and perseverance, we will not get to the end of this crisis. New risks have emerged, particularly in the form of these new variants that have been spreading. The new variant is now has been detected in all but 1 member states, both some of the South African kind, some of the Brazilian kind, and that, of course, is a new source of concern. The very first task, of course, now for us is, besides social medical protocols and all of that, is to achieve widespread vaccination. We have to maintain and increase the vaccination rate. We had a slow start for various reasons. At the same time, we now have up to now, by the end of this week, we will have distributed throughout the EU 50 million doses of vaccines on a population of 450 million people in total. And so that is not bad for a start. It represents about 8% of our adult population, and which is, of course, a good first step. There's still a long way to go, and our ambitions targets are very tough. By the end of next month, by the end of March, member states must have vaccinated at least 80% of their health and social care professionals and of people over 80 years old. So goals that resemble somewhat those in Indonesia, in our European Union. So that is for the end of next month. And by the summer of this year, the European summer, member states must have vaccinated 70% of the adult population. Now, the summer is a period that starts on the 21st of June, and it lasts until the 20th of September. So there is a little bit of flux there possible, but clearly determination is that by September this year, we will have vaccinated a sufficient size of our population to obtain the notion of herd immunity and to obtain a relative normalization of economic and social life. So that is the target that we have set for ourselves. Now, why is this difficult? Of course, first of all, the logistics of setting up such a vaccination campaign. Indonesia faces the same challenge. No country in the world, no region has ever conducted vaccination at this sort of level, vaccinating your 70% or 80% of your entire adult population in one go. That's not been done before. So the logistics, the organizational infrastructure for it has to be built up almost from scratch. So that is one thing. The second thing is about supply of vaccines. Right now, I think the Director General of the WHO said it very clearly. There is plenty of money to buy vaccines, but there aren't enough vaccines to be bought. So we are still in the pharmaceutical sectors, that is, in the process of ramping up production of vaccines. And that is what companies do on their own strength. But certainly for the EU, that is something that we will be working on hard as well, also on the European continent. One example, by the month of June, with a lending from the European Investment Bank, one of the big producers of a vaccine, the BioNTech Pfizer vaccine, will be opening a new plant in Germany, a plant that will be able to produce 1 billion doses per year. Now, when that happens, of course, it could be a real game changer, also taking into account that in other parts of Europe, but also in other parts of the world, more production capacity will come on stream. So boosting production will be essential now, but also for the 3 or 4 months ahead of us. Also supply chains, you know, nobody had thought of this problem in this way, but we didn't need this sort of production capacity and distribution capacity for vaccines, but now we need it. So it means that there is a tremendous need for supplies, for specialized equipment, for specialized filters, for cooling and freezing capacity that is still unmet. So doing that is a major task as well, but it is ongoing. The other challenge we have is detection capacity, strengthening that. It's a task that Indonesia faces as well. What in particular? It's not about the COVID C19 coronavirus, but more about the variants. And we know some of them already. Others are very likely to emerge. And the thing is that when they emerge, we need to know it fast. And we need to be able to detect these viruses so that we can track and trace and deal with them. And for that reason, the EU has just decided to set up a network of sophisticated genome testing laboratories that can precisely do that, that can share information between one another very fast through a that can also share information about vaccines, about clinical trials, and in real time. And I'm very hopeful that we can open up that network also to third countries, and particularly also, in my case, to Indonesia. The leaders yesterday also considered vaccine certificates, a vaccine passport, if you like. Many of us know the WHO yellow booklet that we travel with whenever we go to countries where vaccines are needed or required. And but this would be something particular for this crisis. And now this is, I hadn't thought of it myself, but if you think about it, it dawns on you that this is just not just an easy thing. This is not a little booklet, but of course you have to have some comparability or between the partners that use it. And in other words, the vaccine, of course, it doesn't only necessarily passes the information that the person carrying it has been vaccinated. It can also carry information about, has the person recently done a PCR test, and if so, which one, and the results, and or does the passport need to say this person was infected by COVID at some point, but is healthy now, but may still have the antibodies in the bloodstream, and how do you interpret that? So you come into questions, fairly detailed medical questions, but also detailed questions about the person, the privacy of information, that we have not thought of so much ever before. But this is probably something that has to be coming in the next weeks inside Europe. The international dimension has to be taken into account. How do you handle foreign citizens who travel to Europe for work, for a week, or for a longer stay? Students who come to Europe or to Indonesia for a year or for a semester. All these things have to be taken into account, because the last thing you want to do is, by introducing one requirement for one group, you create an unnecessary barrier or bottleneck for another group. So the coherence of the system is essential. That also goes for our internal market. The space of the 27 member states, plus, in fact, the 3 countries that are very closely attached to the EU, Norway, Iceland, and Switzerland. The space where we travel without passports, without where we have the free movement of goods, people, capital, and services. Now, last year, you may know or you may recall, when the crisis broke out, we had a major problem, because all of the sudden member states closed their borders, as they are allowed to do under EU law, in case of public health crisis and the like. But of course, that right led to a breakdown of transport, of travel, of supply chains between the member states. And that, of course, caused a tremendous economic and social impact. So priority for us now is very much to make sure that when borders need to be closed, this is very targeted, this is well justified, this doesn't have unnecessary or excessive side effects, and that it is very much time bound. In other words, it doesn't last a minute longer than necessary. So right now, that is another big topic for the EU leaders. Now, I've spoken so far about what's going on the European continent. We're here in Indonesia, so we want to talk about the international side as well. And that is, of course, international side, the international dimension, and the need for multilateralism is paramount. The EU recognizes that. We have said it from the start of the crisis. No one is safe until everybody is safe. We've said this in words, but also in action, in deeds. We've said that we were the co-host of the summit in May 2020, almost a year ago, about vaccines, and the summit that set up the COVAX vaccine distribution mechanism. Fundamental step that was taken there, and we can say that the COVAX is going to be very probably for time to come the very crucial and the single most important instrument for ensuring equitability and access for the low-income countries and the middle-income ones. European Union was at the start of it, at the cradle of COVAX, also financially. Up to now, we have paid an astronomical amount of 2.2 billion euros, which is 2.7 billion US dollars for the fund, and which makes us our share is almost 40% of all the contributions. So that is a statement, I think, of solidarity that is very objective. The question here for COVAX will be, of course, also the question of supply, sourcing the supply of vaccines so that the COVAX mechanism can spend the money it has on purchasing them and on distributing these vaccines to the beneficiary countries. Indonesia is one beneficiary. I'm very happy with that. And Indonesia has got a commitment to 12 million doses of COVAX vaccines, which should be coming to the country in the next month or so. That's on the vaccine side, with one other comment, and that is that the EU on its own, within or outside or above COVAX, will also be sharing vaccines that we have bought but don't need in the near future. In other words, our contracts do have an excess supply foreseen. So at the moment we have access to that supply, the EU will be starting to share out that excess to third countries. And we then think particularly, of course, the countries in the European neighborhood, in the east of the EU, in the south, the Mediterranean, and as well as Africa in the first instance. I should also mention the financial support other than vaccines that the EU has made available for third countries. Again, it's a massive amount of money, 38 billion euros, so 45 billion US dollars, more or less, worldwide. 800 million euros of that amount is meant for the countries of ASEAN, and within that 800, 200 million euros are for Indonesia. And what do we do with that money? To summarize, but two main components. First of all, we have been funding 6 or 7 civil society organizations, almost in different places of the country, different islands, organizations that work with vulnerable people, the elderly, women, children, especially, and that provide these target groups with specific support in terms of healthcare, social aid, protective equipment, masks, and the like, in order to protect them in their vulnerability. I've spoken to a number of these civil society organizations, and I'm absolutely impressed by the work they do in very difficult circumstances with people who absolutely need support and who might not get it without this aid from the civil society organizations. So that is one major component of our work. The second one is strengthening the medical infrastructure, so to say, which is the same as saying is in 2 loans for 2 big hospitals in Indonesia, one in East Java and one in South Sulawesi. These are loans that are a mixture of support from the EU budget with loan finance from the development banks of France and of Germany. So a co-production to support these projects. And that is the last thing I would say about our aid, whether it's vaccines or whether it's financial support. The EU works as a whole, as a group, EU and EU member states together. We pool our resources. We have constituted the name, the entity of Team Europe, which brings together the EU member states, and the development banks, like the development banks of individual member states. I mentioned France and Germany, but also the European Investment Bank is involved and will be involved very strongly. They are going to discuss with the Ministry of Finance of Indonesia a very large loan for the support of the COVID response program in Indonesia. I expect that will be concluded within the next couple of months. I conclude there the part on the cooperation and the finance, with one final comment, and that is about multilateralism. It is very, very clear to us as EU that this crisis, without a multilateral approach, is not going to come under control anytime soon. We recognized from the start that we can't solve the problem on the European continent alone. The same is true for Indonesia, the same is true for China, for the United States. And we have to have a global response that, on the one hand, of course, binds countries into a committed and persistent approach on their home territories, but secondly also makes sure that nobody is left behind. It's one of these other phrases that many people are using. The UN Secretary General talks about that. No country should be left behind. And I think that is a very fundamental tenet also of the EU's approach to the crisis. And I think I can also say that Indonesia thinks along exactly the same line of a multilateral response. The last part of my introduction before we open the floor is just a very brief word about recovery. And of course, the emergency response is one, but we have to look beyond it and see how we can restart our economic life in a normal way, how we can overcome the crisis of the past year and build back. We've done a lot of work over the past year in terms of the immediate socio-economic response, with large sums of money made available from the EU budget, but also from the member states' budget, for helping out companies and citizens particularly hard hit by the crisis. We've paid and are still paying parts of the salary bill of staff of companies that are unable to generate the revenues that allow them to pay the staff. Otherwise, we are permitting state aid and paying state aid to companies that are especially hard hit. Look at the aviation industry, look at the tourism industry. I think Indonesia knows everything about that as well. Those participating from Bali can confirm that also from the Bali perspective. These are severe problems, and of course, in such a severe, extreme situation, you have to help. You have to give up your normal rules about subsidization and state aid. You just have to help, because otherwise people will just go down. And if one person goes down, if one company goes down, this will affect the neighbor, the other company, the suppliers, etc. So for that reason, we've paid massively on immediate response. But looking beyond that, of course, we have to rebuild the economy like we wanted to see in a normal or semi-normal circumstance. And there's one thing I would like to stress about the EU's approach, and that is that we see that recovery as a green recovery. The climate crisis was momentarily eclipsed by the COVID crisis, but it is there. And climate crisis, in fact, could be an even bigger one than the COVID crisis currently is. So we cannot delude ourselves at all. And we must therefore make sure that we integrate the greening of our economy and cutting carbon within as one of the key motifs and one of the key themes of our recovery approach. And that is simply also because money is scarce. You can spend a rupiah, you can spend a euro only once, and there are limits to how much you can borrow. We have borrowed a lot, as has in Indonesia, and maybe we will still borrow, but you cannot eternally continue to do so. So we have to combine, that was the decision of the EU leaders, combine post-COVID recovery with our climate policy. What does that climate and green policy mean to do? It means to make our economy truly circular and truly carbon neutral by the year 2050. Carbon neutrality and climate and biodiversity neutrality by the year 2050. Now that is a magnificent and a monumental task, and very ambitious, of course, not easy, but we're doing it. And it is being rolled out step by step and policy by policy right now in the energy sector, in construction, in transport, forests, in agriculture and agri-food, in climate mechanisms itself, and in order to bring us to that climate neutrality. Not easy, as I said, because at the end of the day, between the member states, there are differences in terms of their economic structure, in terms of their capacity to fund the transition that is necessary. And some member states have a longer transition path to go. And so, of course, in such a situation, the most advanced economies within the EU will have to support those who have to make this longer transition, and also to make sure that also within the EU, no one is left behind, and we manage to work together towards that common goal. There are intermediary steps for that, and one is naturally 2030. The current target of the year for the or benchmark year for the Paris Agreement on climate change, on climate action rather, and for that year, the EU has increased its commitment, and it will announce this at the next COP meeting, the Conference of Parties that will come together in Glasgow in November of this year. And we have raised our target, and we will announce this officially in Glasgow, from 40 to 55%. 55% CO2 cuts by 2030 compared to the year 1990. So that is a very ambitious goal that we have committed ourselves to, and internally in law, in EU law, and will commit ourselves to externally in Glasgow and multilaterally towards the end of this year. Of course, we hope and we promote that partners around the world take the same course, and some do. The UK wants to be climate neutral, carbon neutral by 2050. Japan, Korea, China 2060. US, we need to wait and see still, but we are quite optimistic that the US administration will go down a very similar road. The indications are very promising. And of course, here, sitting in Jakarta, I'm very hopeful that also Indonesia will make this extra step towards the common goal of climate neutrality and carbon neutrality as early as possible. The EU will support that. Of course, we will have available financial support through, particularly in the form of lending. Much of it is private sector driven, of course, but companies that have to innovate and modernize their production, develop renewables and so on. So that is bankable, as we say, and with a lot of know-how exchange to make this this possible. And for me, as EU ambassador here in Jakarta, and the same goes for the ambassadors in Jakarta, the ambassadors of the member states, that will be a very important topic of our bilateral discussions with the authorities of Indonesia. I stop there for now. I've spoken far too long already, but I am back in your hands, Dr. Avi, for the next part of the program.
Thank you, Ambassador Vincent Piket. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. And maybe I would like to let you know that Dean Ari have to leave because he had to go to the hospital at 3 o'clock. So maybe we'll say goodbye to Dean Ari. And I would like to open just some brief conclusion of what Ambassador Piket already explained to us. He explained about how EU also experienced social fatigue due to the COVID circumstances in the EU member countries. But EU leaders have met and they are doing the meeting now, today and tomorrow, the European Council, to respond to these circumstances and plan for the post-COVID recovery. And Ambassador Piket also already explained to us about several strategies that EU have taken to cope with this pandemic. The first is the strategy in the health, in the field of health, especially on the vaccine, increase of the vaccine rate in the EU member countries, and how also EU try to speed up the development or the production of the COVID vaccine, especially for the new type of the COVID-19 pandemic. And so they continue to do this development, including to establish new factory in Germany, etc. And the second strategy is in the field of border management. You already heard about the problem of the spreading of the COVID, and the EU countries stop borders, and this is one of the strategy they do. And this is a field of the question, if you would like to pose, because then we would like to compare EU mobility before and after COVID for member countries and outside member countries. This is a very interesting question to be asked. And the third area of the strategy that EU do is in the field of international cooperation. EU support the establishment of COVAX for vaccine access for small countries, and provide financial support for other countries to fight for the pandemic, and also to produce and to access to the vaccine. And for ASEAN country itself, you contribute about 800 million, if I'm not mistaken from the number. And also for Indonesia, EU support especially civil society organization and to strengthen medical infrastructure in Indonesia. So there's three types of the strategy, and another strategy in the field of economic recovery. It is interesting that EU emphasized the green recovery, and you already heard the explanation from the ambassador that EU would like to be carbon neutral by 2050, and establish a circular economy in the same time while doing this recovery, which is very ambitious and very hard, huge task. And this is also the area of question that we can pose to the ambassador. Okay, and now I would like to read some of the question, and maybe the ambassador can also read it because we have already 16 16 good question and Q&A platform. And if I may to choose some of them, that's my colleague already helped me to do that. Maybe I would like to pose the question from Akram Irman. Akram Irman is from Andalas University in West Sumatra. He said he is asking Ambassador on the EU coronavirus vaccine strategy, which published on the European Commission official website. This student do his job by checking your website. Regarding the EU coronavirus vaccine strategy, the EU chose to take a centralized approach in the EU recovery process during the pandemic. However, this will sometimes be applied with adjustment in each member country, which could be contrary to the EU strategy in its technicality. I'm not really sure the meaning of this question, but let's see. The question is, will the EU tolerate technical unilateral action from member in vaccine policy during this pandemic, and can EU guarantee that the EU strategy on vaccine is implemented and adhere to each member in order to maintain EU cohesiveness? So I'm guessing he's asking about vaccine nationalism and whether it can challenge EU EU cohesiveness during this time. Do you want to answer this one by one, or you want me to choose some best question? Okay, I will choose two others, so and then you can answer these three at the same time. Okay. The second I would like to ask from Ilham Putra. Oh, he's my student. Oh, okay, let's see how he asks this. Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, the rise of China, threat from Russia, Brexit, and America re-entry into global diplomacy, how is from your opinion, how does European Union sees himself in the international stage of the next 5 years? So it's a bit of your topic, but this is the position of EU in the global stage at the moment. Maybe if you, and the third question in this session, maybe the last one, and after that I'll give you a chance to answer it. This is from Susilo from Elementary Islamic School of Hashim Ashari Kedoren Blitar. So this is from East Java, and this is elementary school. Pak Susilo, I don't know whether Pak Susilo is the student or the lecturer, but this is his question. The impact of pandemic in EU. What about the positive and negative impacts of vaccine on human? Because there are still a number of vaccines that have not been finalized and are suitable for distribution in the community. I'm guessing he's asking about the COVID vaccine development and how maybe EU standard. EU standard usually very high, and how do you think about this? Three questions at the beginning, Ambassador.
Thank you. Three very interesting and good questions, and I'm really grateful for that. And I'll just take them in the order in which you read them. And first of all, the question of apologies if I mispronounce your name, but Akram Irman from West Sumatra, and about a centralized approach and adherence and so on. You know, for vaccines, what we decided to do is to have indeed the central purchasing of vaccines by the European Commission, so the EU's executive branch, on behalf of all member states. And why did we do that? Because we thought, also after speaking to the pharmaceutical companies, that if we placed large contracts with them and made a down payment of part of the money, we would generate and push a lot of research and in development of vaccines. In other words, if you place a big order, you can get probably a faster result, a faster supply than if you have a small one. So that was one argument. The second argument was that we thought, and I think it makes perfect sense, that if you start having if a pharmaceutical company starts having 27 member states coming to them versus one, you get a very, very messy situation about negotiation and I pay a little bit more, and if you do this, and but if you do that, then etc. We didn't want that sort of competition amongst the member states. Member states didn't want it, and for that reason, this centralized approach was chosen. Now we get to the moment where we are beginning to get the supply on the table, and we will be. We have started to distribute the vaccines from the firms directly to the member states according to a preset ratio between the member states, and that seems to work in regards to that. But as I said earlier on, supply, the sheer quantity of the supply continues to be an issue. We hope that we can overcome it rather soon, and so that we can first meet the demand of the member states, so supply is a factor. Plus, of course, as I mentioned earlier, the distribution and logistical chain to get the vaccines down to the patients. You asked about adherence to rules, compliance, and so on. Well, it's a very complex question, a complex answer, and the question is simple. Because you're here covering so many different areas of policy, and the EU law differs from one policy to the other area. For instance, we have very hard legislation if it comes to the internal market and the free flow of approved goods across the borders of the national borders of member states. So that is very easy to enforce in a way, because it's black or white. And if it's black, then the European Commission will intervene and call a member state to order, and in the last instance, take them to court. It happens. Not often, but it does happen. The second example is health. Now, in the EU treaty, it says that public health is the responsibility for member states. It's not an EU responsibility. There's no common policy for health. In other words, what we're doing now, like purchasing vaccines for 27, there's no legal basis for it. There is no hard and fast rule that you can say, pinpoint and say you did not comply with that. So it is an area of cooperation between the member states led by the EU institutions that will function only if people cooperate, all of them, and that everybody makes their point, contribution to it. Now, are individual positions possible of member states over and above the agreed framework? Yes, there are. Some countries will approach things in a different way than others. There is no harmonized formula for lockdowns, when and how to do that. There is no such rule or legislation. Also, as regards the functioning there is a hard rule about which medicines can cross the internal borders within the EU. And that is only medicines, vaccines, that have been approved by the European Medicines Agency. Only those medicines can be sold from one member state to the other freely, etc. Others that haven't got that approval cannot. One member state has bought the Russian vaccine. It's the right for that member state to do it for its own population. Is part of the sovereign responsibility of member states in the area of public health. But what that member states cannot do is transport that vaccine, that unapproved vaccine, across EU member states' border within our single market. So it's that sort of distinction, that sort of nuance that we see day after day visualized in the approach. 2 days ago, the European Commission wrote to 6 or 7 member states saying, you have imposed border restrictions in a way that the European Commission thinks is excessive. Please explain. So that's another example where the EU will intervene whenever there could be a non-compliance with rules. Maybe I take the third question now, just for the coherence, from the colleague in East Java. I didn't catch your name. I'm sorry. About the positive, negative effects on humans. How do you reduce risk? Now, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, is a medical doctor by training. And so she's rather well placed in her job right now. What did she say about vaccines? This is at the start, when at some point she was criticized, why does it take so long to get this approved? Blah, blah, blah. She said, this is not a vaccine race, this is a safety race. In other words, the EU, her approach was to make sure that what we allow onto the EU internal market is safe and has clinical test results, etc., to provide the evidence. So I think that is the key condition that we have applied, and if you look at it, what we have been vaccinating, many countries have been vaccinating also in Indonesia in massive numbers, and sometimes somebody gets a little bit of a fever or a rash as a result of the vaccine, but up to now, as far as I see, we have certainly not got any fatalities that are directly attributable to the vaccines that we have on our inside the European Union in our common program. Then the second question from Ilham Putra, if I'm not mistaken, from Universitas Indonesia, the EU's position on the global stage in the next 5 years. That is a wonderful question for another seminar, and I will not be able to answer it in all detail, but fundamentally, the EU has become convinced that we do not wish to be squeezed between global rivalries. We want good relations with all big powers around the world. United States, fundamental relationship for the EU. China, similarly, not an easy one, but and with many different facets, different components. Some go very well, others go with more difficulty. But certainly we don't want to be pushed into the choice of that also sometimes Indonesia is asked to make. Whom do you belong to? Well, first of all, you belong to yourself. And I'm talking to the EU now. And you have to identify your own interests in this global power play between the various world powers. Let's not forget Russia as well. And and make sure that you have your own autonomy and independence in the key policies that matter to you, whether it's internal or whether it's external, whether it concerns your economic development on your territory, or whether it concerns your trade policy and investment policy. The EU will wish to underline our autonomy, our strategic autonomy, we call it, in order not to be dependent and or overly dependent. We are all dependent on one another. Interdependencies are, of course, the way the world functions these days, but overdependence is something we wish to avoid, and that has meant and will mean certain policy choices as regards strengthening of certain economic sectors, certain subsectors. For instance, batteries. Batteries will be a key part of renewable energy or clean energy before it is renewable for the next 10, 20 years. And at some point, we just realized that we have insufficient battery production capacity. And now, what did we do? With a little bit of a political push from the European Commission, the industry, the large companies, small companies got together into a battery alliance. And that's a couple of years ago, and the results are astounding. That's simply by putting people together, by putting critical mass of know-how, of technological means, we have realized that battery production within the EU has increased by 30% in the space of three years, and that will continue. So it's one very specific example where we say we must be able to stand on our own feet if we have to in certain key sectors. And that is not to say that we close our borders, not at all. For trade, for investment, no. We will continue to be the biggest and most open trader in the world. That is our DNA. For all partners that wish to have also an open trading relationship with us, we are negotiating, for instance, as you probably know, the large comprehensive economic partnership agreement, SEPA, with Indonesia. It's a very, very big exercise. The negotiations are happening this week, today, last day, and that if we do a good job as negotiators, that agreement will basically phase out the very, very, very large majority of all trade import duties between us and other tariff or non-tariff barriers for services and the like. So our border for Indonesia will be very, very open before too long, once we have this agreement in place. And the thing is, that's the very last thing I want to say, open borders lead to more trade, more investment, and that leads to more growth, economic growth. We have the figures to show. we did impact studies before we started negotiating with Indonesia. And our macroeconomic modeling, difficult stuff. Some of you, I'm sure, know how to do that. Showed very clearly that a profound SEPA agreement between Indonesia and the EU will bring Indonesia between extra growth to the amount of 4.5 and 5 billion euros per year after year, by the year 2030, thereabouts. So almost 5 billion euros extra economic output as a result of this agreement with the EU now. That means jobs, that means investment, that means technology development, and in other words, it's something that helps Indonesia's long-term goal towards high-income country, 2045. President Jokowi, very important target, and it will help your short-term recovery from the COVID crisis that we're in right now.
Ambassador, we have more than 30 questions, but some of them is quite related, and some of the repetition to each other, and some even you have already explained them. So we choose some of we think relevant to the topic and can further elaborate your explanation before. One is from Mr. Encep from Bandung, about the medical waste in Indonesia. Recently, medical waste in Indonesia has continued to increase, and the government has not taken it seriously. Of course, medical waste that is disposed of carelessly will have a huge impact on the climate crisis. Based on the data, the accumulation of medical waste is increasing in several areas in Indonesia. I don't know how about it is in the EU, but I think you have a very high standard on this. Yeah, as we all know, the climate crisis is real, and it is much more important to consider. If the assumption is that we are too serious about solving the economy or vaccine, we forget the real climate crisis. How to deal with this? So he's asking about this waste, medical waste, but maybe it's related with this second question. This second question is Zarifa Emily. This is one of my students in International Relations Department, Universitas Indonesia. One of the things that struck me is EU interest in the pursuing European Green Deal. My question would be, how does EU integrate the motto of no country left behind in establishing green infrastructure, not only within the European continents, but most importantly in the developing countries? You already explained some of the financial package provided by EU, but maybe you can give more specific detail on that. And secondly, this is the second question: is the pandemic a barrier to the green transition, or instead it's accelerate the progress? So again, this is also one of the question that I can sharpen the question by asking the EU stress on the green recovery. Is it making it more difficult? Can you do it in the same simultaneously, or if it is make it harder? Especially you already set this target of the carbon neutral 2050. So how realistic is it, and whether it's need further strategy? And I would like to ask this another one. Maybe there's two questions. I'm looking for other because I have to integrate some of the question. Maybe two questions, Ambassador, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ewi. And yeah, medical waste from the colleague in Bandung. I have not too much knowledge about this area, but evidently you have now a pile-up of waste that nobody ever had thought was possible, and it is not easily disposed of. This is waste that can be contaminated by viral elements or what have you. So you have to take care, and you can't just put it in the garbage dump. And so there is I have no easy solution to it. For it, except that it brings back, of course, the continuing question about of circular production. And now we are now in a crisis moment, and we had not thought that we would be using up PPEs, protective equipment and garments at the levels that we're doing now, and masks and gloves and everything. So it is still for the future. We'll have to think about how we can bring in the notion of circularity, of reusing the materials, of recycling materials in a safe manner, also for this particular type of waste. Certainly, what we cannot do is dump the problem on somebody else, and it's impossible to ship these things away from your own country, your own region, and to other countries, other regions, and saddle somebody else with the problem to deal with it. That is not the sort of approach that the EU stands for at all. And companies who do that, if in case they are European firms, they'll be taken to court. And get fined. On the Green Deal and no country being left behind, and the question, pandemic, the crisis is a barrier or accelerator of change. Maybe I'll take the first part first. Sorry, the second part first. The barrier is money, and which is scarce for everybody. But the accelerator element is very much the notion, I think, that amongst politicians and government leaders, that the pandemic has brought home to us the fact that we are living in a very perilous, dangerous moment, and that we have a tremendous COVID crisis on our hands, and that we certainly cannot, however, ignore the rest of the problems that the world faces, and climate is evidently the biggest one of them. So I think the realization has shaped very quickly that we need to pursue with our green policy, despite the focus on dealing with the medical emergency. Nobody has called that into doubt. It's very interesting. There was, of course, discussion about how you do it and how fast and how about the funding. Yes, these discussions happen. It's normal. But none of our member states have in a serious way called that fundamental objective of greening our economy into doubt. Let's not forget that there is a tremendous civil society, civil citizen movement in Europe that is asking governments to act. Our air in some cities in particular is just too dirty. People don't accept that any longer. It kills people. We lose life expectancy as a result. Not everybody, but will suffer that. But we lose life expectancy. It's one example. People don't want it anymore. People see their forests burn down in repeated summer heat crises. The science almost systematically points to climate change as the main contributing factor to such heat crises like we had in Europe the past 2 summers. So there's a tremendous citizen push in the large majority of member states that wants the leaders to work on this, the green dimension, and so that's why it's the policy was pursued. The Green Deal in an international perspective, I think it's a very good question. The EU, of course, we need partners. We have goals, but we also need partners. We want to green our economy. We don't want to become or remain a community, market where we allow products that are dirty, that are don't meet certain basic characteristics in terms of circularity and so on, that harm biodiversity massively on the market of the European Union. Now, it means that we will be speaking to our partners around the globe about making trade sustainable. We do that, for instance, in the SEPA negotiations with Indonesia. The SEPA will have a chapter about trade and sustainable development. What will be in that? Of course, there will be certain ambitions about using trade for precisely doing that, development, economic growth, growing trade, while also preserving the biodiversity of Indonesia, while contributing to renewable energy standards and to the decarbonization gradually of your economy. So with, as I mentioned before, lending, massive lending from the European development banks, very, very positive interest rates, long-term, certainly not. The money is available, and that won't be the biggest issue. It's more a matter of choice, a matter of saying we don't want certain forms of petrol in the tanks of our cars any longer. We don't want this sort of energy in our energy mix any longer, and then work towards a goal. That's how the EU did it. This goes back to the 1970s when this notion first emerged. It wasn't easy either. I know that also from the Netherlands. We used to have coal, for instance, like Indonesia does now. And at a certain moment, the decision was taken not to have coal any longer. So you have to do a transformation. You have to see what can you do with coal if you don't burn it. And there are derivative industries that you can link up with coal, chemicals particularly. And you have to think about your citizens, your human resources, your workers. It's a reskill for different things, from fossil fuels to renewable fuels. It's a transition. It's possible, can be done, and it's good for the job market. We have the figures on that. The renewable energy, the green jobs, are well-paying jobs. President Biden said the same in his election campaign in the United States, and we have the evidence of that inside the European Union. And the green sector is the fastest growing sectors in the industry. So there are ways forward. It is not yes, there is a difference in progress made by the EU compared to others, but it is all bridgeable, and if we cooperate, that's the bottom line.
Thank you very much for a very detailed explanation, especially about this Green Deal and green recovery. I just would like to remind, especially those who already study about regionalism in EU, this is an example how regional institution can be a mechanism for state to cut down the transactional costs. You don't have to deal every issue, single issue with all countries through the EU, through the regional institution. State can just do it in the same time. So this is why institution can help state to cut the cost of transactional. So this is one of the theory maybe relevant when we study EU. Ambassador, if you don't mind, there are two good questions, two issues. I'm not going to ask about green recovery now, but several students asking about border. And I combine three or two questions together about the border and about the mobility in EU. And one question is about whether the closing of the border that you already explained in your talk impact on the mobility within the EU, and impact, and how do you think about on the some of the discussion on the globalization movement now? We have globalization when we open our border, but now all countries close their border, including the EU. And so the students, this question from Fraka, whether it is actually you do the deglobalization. And another question is on related to this is about the impact of this policy on the tourists in EU. This is Agung. Agung is one of the lecturers from the Udayana University in Bali. He asked about the tourism policy and its preparedness for the post-recovery, post-COVID recovery. Will EU give permission to travel from EU member countries or from also include from others? So this is also about the mobility. This closed border will strict only to outsiders, or it's also include the member countries within EU? And how about the tourists within EU and outside EU? And whether and maybe I will push a little bit the question about the impact on the tourist industry in EU, because I know this is one of the source of the income for the EU. Another question is about, so that's about border. Another is social behavior. We talk about it a lot at the university, and last year I also hold a webinar on this. It is about social response to the government policy, especially social restriction. There are some problem of EU COVID-19 spreader. It is asked by Richard Sajili, also my student from UI, about EU roles to combat what I call COVID-19 spreader behavior in many European countries. So how do you think is this? You discussed about many policies taken by you to combat COVID-19, and one of my friends that lives in one of the EU countries said that her country has a good COVID-19 policy, but many people doesn't follow the health protocols. So just like Indonesia, does EU created a policy or social campaign measures to combat the COVID-19 spreaders behavior, as mentioned about the previously? If there is a measure, what does the priority? So this is about the social behavior in EU countries. So two question about mobility and border, as well as about society.
Yeah. Thank you. I apologize, I didn't answer the mobility question earlier on, and I fundamentally think that what we see now is temporary. It's not if we close borders or limit access for foreigners for the EU, it's not part of a deglobalization. It is just part of a set of measures that we have to take right now. It will be temporary and it will be limited. the policy we have right now does not allow foreign entry from countries unless these countries are declared at, at a level of infection rate and so on that is comparable to ours. So one day, this when infection rates go down on our side in the first place, but also in other countries, we will start opening up again. One particular point, particularly given the academic context we have together this afternoon, is that our legislation on foreign entry provides that very explicitly that students and scholars and researchers continue to be allowed to enter the European Union. Of course, maybe with an antigen test or fit to fly and all of that, but that's normal even inside Indonesia. So, but there is the possibility to enter the EU and to carry out your research and your study period. And that was a very conscious choice by the EU lawmaker. The impact on tourism. Now, Pak Agung is asking this question from Bali. I was in Bali myself for the new year, and it's disastrous. There's no other word for it, and you feel so sorry for the people who work or used to work in the hotels, in the restaurants, etc. There is, as far as I can see, no other answer to give. That we will have to suffer it for a bit longer. And it will come, the recovery will come back very quickly. I'm certain. People are so eager to travel. Right? They haven't traveled for a year. So they have, been saving money. It's all waiting for the opportunity to use that money on a flight and on a stay, once the situation clears up. And now for the EU, on the EU side, it's the same. You may know that the EU is the biggest tourist destination globally. In countries on the Mediterranean, they are very, very strongly dependent on tourism. So we are absolutely determined to try and make sure that we don't miss out on the tourist season that starts in the European summer, so around about June to September, and which is vital for our economy, for our jobs, but it's also vital for the tourists, like Indonesians who wish to come to Europe for their holidays, in the same way as Europeans wish to come to Bali once again. So this is not a structural problem, and maybe some, the crisis may lead to some different forms of tourism and maybe some different patterns in the tourist flows, but that is probably too early to say anything about it. The third question about social behavior and social responsibility and the government responsibility in maintaining social behavior. This is an issue, and the colleague who quoted a friend who is in Europe right now, I think it's right. It's not, at the end of the day, not very dissimilar from here, where there is also pressure on the compliance rates. The studies show it. And it all has to do with people being so absolutely, what to say, frustrated after such a long time. And I have no other answer to it, that we will have to persist. We have no choice. If we open up our society and pretend as if nothing happens, we will not get out of this crisis. Vaccination alone will not get us out of the crisis. We will have to continue to have the other measures to protect ourselves and be prudent. And now, maybe in 2 or 3 or 4 months from now, by June, we will have, President Jokowi said just the other day, a situation where schools can reopen from August, he mentioned, and universities can start reopening their classrooms. And Dr. Evi, I think she looks like she looks forward to that day in the same way as students look forward to it, and because that is what we want, the way we want to live. Social beings, humans are social beings, and that involves personal contacts with your colleagues, with your fellow students, and others. But on occasion, when there is lack of compliance, if people throw parties that are just outside the limits of the law, there's no other answer than enforce. And in European countries, including my home country, the police has come into action to close down parties, and people have been fined, etc. There were riots in my home country at some point at the start of the lockdown. It was very brief, but it was very fierce as well. However, these were not normal citizens. The Dutch Prime Minister was quite outspoken about it. These were hooligans, and so people who just used the opportunity to make a statement of whatever they want to say. Anyway, it was quickly over, and we, on the whole, I think the large majority of citizens in Europe, as well as here, want to contribute to solving the crisis rather than work against it. And that I think is a very positive thing. That think about it, that I don't know how many there are in this meeting, but I think by and large, all of us are trying to contribute to the solution. And that's the fundamental thing. It takes a contribution by each and every one of us. It's not just sufficient if your neighbor or your friend in Surabaya does it. No, it takes yourself as well.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. I don't think we have 30 questions, but I don't think I would like to torture you or burden you this Friday afternoon with further question. But I think we'll close here, and unless you would like to pick up any of the questions that you answer from the Q&A. But from the question that I already skimmed quite quickly, it's usually as about the vaccine and its distribution of vaccine, mobility, and also about the society, like I just mentioned, and also about the economy. As a lot of questions about the economy, green economy and green recovery, because they from your explanation, they also ask how can you do this, because it's going to be very difficult, because the green economy itself already difficult. When you combine it with the COVID recovery strategy, it's even harder. And I also saw some question about the relation between EU and its member states, how EU deliver vaccine, etc., which I think already explained from your speech, and also about EU international collaboration. And I think also you already answered it in your speech. So I would like to close the Q&A session now. And if I may, to invite you for closing statement before, after this, we'll call 10 people who already sent a good question. According to the committee, I'm helped by a team behind us who choose the 10 good questions. I will call them one by one after this. But before that, if you would like to please give a concluding remark before we close. Please, Ambassador.
Well, thank you. I would have loved to have more, but I think it's also for me time to conclude. But it was a wonderful opportunity to be with you this afternoon. I'm happy to come back virtually or physically. We will do it in the way that is possible at any point in time that is convenient to you. If I have one last message to particularly the students is there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation and fake news floating around on COVID, on the virus, on the vaccine and so on. My message is to you: be critical, think and think again. Don't trust everything you see printed, and speak to other colleagues and compare notes and impressions, and be rational. We should be rational about COVID, and not fall into the traps of conspiracy theories, of which there are very many ones. Some are very creative, but at the end of the day, it's just a theory and part of the disinformation campaign that we sometimes see. So that's my message to you. Stay healthy, stay happy, and persist, and we'll come back better than we were before, I'm certain. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Piket. Very wise advice to all the young staff. But hoax is not only for young, so a lot of old people also do a lot of hoax. But yes, this is a very important message and advice from the ambassador to all of us regarding the circumstances in this COVID circumstances. I would like to now call 10 names that already sent a good question. First is Akram Irman. This is the first question that you already answered. Akram Irman from Andalas University. And the second is Novrel Esa Yubel from Universitas Nasional Jakarta. And the third is Revin Muhammad Alsidais from International Relations Department UI. And the fourth is Hanif Junisaf from I didn't know, Hanif Junisaf number, and the next one is Alifa Diamantha from International Relations Department UI, and number 10 is number 6 is Rajyan Erlangga Rizki Wardhana from FISIP Universitas Jambi, and number 7 is Rajyan already. Rajyan is okay. Number 7 will be hang on. Gregory Santos. No address, but Gregory Santos. And next is Encep from Bandung. And last one is Zarifa Emily. I think that's 9 by now, so I will put one more, number 37, Praka Dawa Putra. Right? Okay, 10 altogether, 10. Oh, okay, this is already put by my team, the name. Please contact the committee to claim your prizes, and then I'll see you. And I would like to close now by saying thank you very much for all your participation. And this public lecture is a cooperation between FISIP Universitas Indonesia and the delegation of European Union to Indonesia and Brunei Darussalam, and also in conjunction with the 53rd anniversary of our Fakultas of Social and Political Science, Universitas Indonesia. So of course, we would like to thank Ambassador Vincent Piket for this marvelous opportunity, and we learned a lot from his experience and observation of the EU policy, and also a lot of messages that also from Indonesia in his replies and speech. So we hope that we can continue the dialogue with Ambassador and colleague from European Union in the future. And this platform, online platform, proved to be quite effective to reach out to all of our wider community in Asia. Maybe we would like to use it for next time, even if the pandemic already control, and maybe physical meeting sometime, hopefully close in the future. Again, thank you very much, Ambassador, for this opportunity, for your time and effort, and we very much appreciate your speech. Thank you very much also from the team that prepared this lecture, from the European Union delegation, and also from Universitas Indonesia, and also for all people involved in this. I see Professor Dodi Prayogo in our, the dean has to leave because he has to go to the hospital, but we have the vice dean, Professor Dodi Wijogo, with us now. Mas Dodi, can you give a closing for the all? So for me, this is the end of our meeting, and I'll hand out to Professor Dodi, and thank you very much again for your attention. Hand to you, Professor Dodi, please.
Yes, just a short speak. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. I think it is a very good opportunity for us today to understand the phenomenon about COVID here compared to EU especially. And then I think we can learn more about how the developed countries handle the vaccination and the issue of EU in Europe and compared to East Asia countries. So I think students from our university and other universities, I think, learn much about what you have delivered today. And then we are sure that they get much understanding about what's happening now. And I think the next future, maybe we will invite you for other topics discussing about our future and our international relationship between the Southeast Asia, Indonesia, and also European countries. Thank you very much, and selamat sore.
Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Maybe next talk about Sawit and others. Thank you. Because we have 300 participants this afternoon, which is a good achievement. Thank you very much. Thank you for all.